Welcome to the Stahls Heat Press for Profit podcast, a show designed for people who are trying to make it in their heat print hustle. I'm your host, Josh Ellsworth, and today we're excited to welcome Milissa Marshall, business owner of Bragg Swag. Bragg Swag is a small family-owned creative design shop located in Northern Virginia. They supply unique quality apparel and gear for all ages. In addition, they provide custom graphic design and screen printing services. Bragg Swag sells and ships nationwide through their website, braggswaginc.com, and their items are also available through retail partners and at events. We're excited to dive into today's episode, sharing some of Melissa's successes and challenges. Milissa, welcome to the podcast. Can you spend a minute or two telling our listeners a little bit about yourself and your journey into the world of decorated apparel?
Yeah, I'd love to, Josh. Thanks so much for having me this morning. So I started Bragg Swag about 7 years ago. I was a public school art teacher at the time. I was actually a public school art teacher for 18 years. And in 2012, I was still teaching when I started Bragg Swag. At that time, I actually had two partners who were friends of mine, and they were also teachers. And it's been kind of an interesting journey because when we first started Bragg Swag, shirts were not really our focus at all. We were focused on stickers. I could go into all that backstory, but I don't want to take up too much time with something that's not necessarily relevant to where we are today. So long story short, the partners and everybody was on their own life journey. One had a baby, another one decided to go back to school for her doctorate. So their journeys took them in a little different direction than me. And a couple of years ago, we decided to part ways amicably. We're all still friends, so I'm very happy for that. And so it's just been me for the last couple of years. And, that definitely has its pros and cons. At first, I think, I was a little disappointed that they decided to leave the business because when we started, it was going to be, the three of us were in this together. And so I was concerned about how I was going to manage what was being handled by three people and now just down to one person, myself. But in the long run, I think I came to see being a single business owner as an asset in a lot of ways. So while I still had the partners, a little bit into our journey, we actually decided to start going into doing shirts and still had the stickers and kind of thought they could be complementary products. The stickers were intended, they were aimed at ski resorts actually, and kids. I won't go into all of that again, but we do still have stickers today, but it's not the ski resort stickers. Our primary focus is apparel, and we do some tote bags and things like that. So 7 years later, here I am. And, I've experienced a lot of growth in the past couple of years. I did leave teaching after four years of teaching and having Bragg Swag on the side. So since I think about May of 2017, I've been doing Bragg Swag full time.
Awesome. Well, that's always exciting to be able to dive in full time and be able to make all the decisions on your own. So we'll unpack that a bit here in a second. But before we get too deep, I want to give our listeners a quick overview of the show. Format's really simple. We host casual conversations with apparel decorators like Milissa in hopes that these conversations might have an impact on their business and yours. So, Milissa, just to kind of get into a little bit of that story, you left teaching, which is a big step, in May 2017. I guess I should ask, do you miss it at all?
That's a frequently asked question, Josh. And I will say this, after doing it for 18 years, that was certainly a long time. What I miss are the relationships with my students and, my coworkers, but I definitely don't miss a lot of the administrative stuff and political things that go along with public education.
Yeah, I got to imagine it's a polar opposite to be, one, having your own business, and then really where you've evolved to is being, I assume, the sole decision maker in the business, being able to kind of execute on your vision and what you want is probably freeing, but also a little bit daunting at times. Is that right?
That is 100% accurate.
Good. So we got some good background on the business with it started as focused on stickers, and now you're doing a lot of apparel. Can you kind of walk through the different printing technologies that you are utilizing to print the apparel and I guess the stickers or anything else you're making in the business?
Yes, absolutely. So initially, when in the early years of the business, I believe your first guest was I think outlined a similar experience to where she was outsourcing the printing, and we were doing the same thing. And on the one hand, I felt good about supporting other local businesses, but on the other hand, the quality control wasn't there, and for what I was paying them to do my shirts, I didn't really feel like it wasn't a good deal for me. So eventually I decided to bite the bullet. I bought an entry-level press to kind of get started because that was what I could afford. Again, I know other folks have said something similar, just to kind of learn the lay of the land. But I think about maybe a year and a half ago or so, we decided to go ahead and get the Hotronix Auto Clam, which has been a game changer. I mean, that is just such a quality piece of equipment, and it's made things so much easier. So, but we do transfers. We don't do any vinyl weeding or any of that.
Yeah, I looked at your website a bit, and just to remind everybody, if you want to check out Melissa's website, it's Bragswag Inc. That's inc.com, and you can see some of her designs on there. It looked like you had some fairly good detail and intricacy in the designs. Those are all primarily completed with screen printed transfers?
Yes. We actually, so I'm glad you mentioned about the detail, because a lot of our designs are either in their entirety or at least partially hand-drawn, that I have drawn those designs. So I'm sure, as you could imagine, doing the vinyl might be a little hairy on some of those.
Yeah, a lot of people do it, and I say, why in the world would you do that, right?
Right. There's an easier way, but I guess everybody has to do whatever process feels best to them. So the transfers have worked really well for us.
Good. And so when we were prepping for the show, I asked kind of the top 3 successes in the last year. One of the things you noted were more wholesale clients. So just so we can understand a little bit about how you're selling, you obviously have the e-commerce store where people can come, they can purchase an individual shirt, but you're also selling wholesale. What does that look like? Who are you selling to?
So the wholesale, like everything, I guess you start somewhere, and that usually means starting small with convincing one other business owner to take a chance on you. And that's exactly what happened very early on with Bragswag. One of our first wholesale clients was the owner of a local running store. And, tying back to the teaching, interestingly enough, I actually taught the owner's children. So I think that helped establish, some level of trust and a connection. And to this day, he's still one of our wholesale clients. And to this day, I'm just so grateful that he did take that chance on us. And our shirts have actually done fairly well. I would say better than fairly well, quite well, in his shop. And we usually will try to roll out a new design for them at least once a year. So The wholesale has definitely grown from that first initial client. Most of them are in my local area. I feel like if small business owners can kind of support one another in that way and each leverage, the ability to support other local business owners, it's a win-win for everybody. So as a matter of fact, it's kind of funny. I just picked up another wholesale client this morning before we got on this call.
Well, congratulations.
Thank
That's
you.
Exciting.
It is really exciting. Yeah. So that part of the business has definitely grown. And I've really enjoyed it because, although the margins are not what they are with retail, it definitely allows me to reach. I look at it as I am reaching the audiences of those business who I may or may not otherwise reach.
Yeah, I think that's important. It's all about getting more tentacles out there, and really you get brick and mortar stores that way.
Exactly.
For your product line.
Yes. And so for me, it's been a very good experience.
Good. And so I guess, because we get a lot of questions actually about pricing and costing and those sorts of things. I don't want to go crazy deep into it, but just from a margin perspective, do you have any advice for other folks that may want to sell their line to other local companies like the running retailer and those sorts of opportunities? What do they need to be prepared with when they go in to make those presentations?
I think that's a great question, Josh. And I think I was probably one of the people asking those questions in the group over these last couple of years. It's definitely been kind of a feeling it out kind of process to see what, you have to understand within your own mind that you are running a business, so therefore you cannot give your product away. So you have to set margins that feel good to you. And you also, from my perspective, you want the business owner to feel like that by purchasing your product, that they're going to be able to then turn around and make a profit on that as well. So I feel like there's a fine line there, but you kind of get a feel for, or at least I have gotten a feel for, what your local market will bear, and if you're only dealing locally. I've not ventured into selling through some nationwide wholesale channels yet. Like Fair is one that we were accepted to, but unfortunately it's gone on the back burner for me, just being busy with, the other day-to-day aspects of running the business. So I would like to explore that at some point in the near future. But what I have developed up to this point and am fairly comfortable with is I will give prospective retailers basically a sheet that kind of outlines my different tiers. The maximum discount I will give is 50% off of retail, and that's for a significant quantity, which to me, 100 or more pieces will get that discount. I will wholesale as few as 12 pieces. But they all have to be the same design. Now, it can be on a different product. So if they wanted to do, say, 6 shirts and 6 tote bags, or 50 shirts and 50 tote bags, they can do that as long as it is the same design. If they want multiple designs, that each tier is kind of based per design, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, especially with how you're fulfilling the orders. Drives the pricing, right?
Right. And that's another thing too, since I'm dealing locally at this time, I make these deliveries in person. So I get to establish those face-to-face connections with people, which I think in turn builds a solid relationship and is kind of good for, a long-term working relationship with these other business owners.
Agreed. So for our listeners, you heard some really important stuff there. One of the things is having a strategy, regardless of what that strategy is. Having a line sheet, a price sheet, defined pricing allows you to go in and say the price is this and not be as vulnerable to price pressure, because you give the wholesaler, in this case, a way to get a better price, and it's through quantity, which drives your cost as a business owner down. So I think that's a great strategy, and it's exciting that you have a strategy. I'm sure that's why you're doing well. So as far as finding wholesale suppliers, walk me through the journey, and then we'll move off of this point after this question. But walk me through the journey, the one that you landed this morning. Did you call out on them first? Did they hear about you somewhere else? How did that come to be?
Okay, so it's kind of a funny story, but I feel like most of the stories that I could tell you about how I connected with retailers would sound kind of the same. They are another local shop in my, not in my particular town, but in the same county. It's a small county, so they're fairly close by. And they sell... it's kind of a gourmet shop. They're like a deli/gourmet shop. They sell wine. They sell all kinds of fancy little foods. It's just kind of a landmark in this area. And it's, just the power of social media is so funny. Of course, I've been a customer of theirs many times in the past, but they recently had a post on Facebook about some other local business owners' merchandise that they were carrying. And it just clicked in my head, why have you not approached them yet? Because one of the designs we have is specific to the county in which we live. So I said, well, you know what? I'm going to just message them on Facebook and say, hey, I saw your post. I know you guys support a lot of other local small businesses by selling their products in your shop. Here's what I have. Would you be interested? And that was what happened.
And
crazy, right?
And so I'm sorry, I may have missed it. Did you say you messaged them through Facebook, emailed them, or did you go into the store?
So initially, I messaged them on Facebook. The person that I chatted with there connected me to the buying manager. And then I emailed her, and she just got back to me this morning saying she was interested. So, the power of one Facebook message has now landed me another, what I hope will be long-term customer.
Mm-hmm. No, I love it. And I think a couple things there is just having the guts to reach out is the first step to make that call, because the worst thing that can happen is a no, or we're not interested. And then also the fact that you're able to kind of cut through the clutter, and instead of just going in and interrupting their day in the store, which is, I think, could be a good strategy as well, but you don't always get the right person. Sometimes you just get a retail associate that doesn't want to pass you on. You messaged, you give them some time to think and get you to the proper person to be able to consider whether or not they could carry your line. So that's a great success.
Yeah, you definitely made a valid point there too. I've definitely done the walk in and see what happens. It's usually just on a spur of the moment kind of thing. If I'm driving around and I think to myself, that might be a good spot to try to sell our products, I have just done the pop in, and that's led to, as you said, mixed results. Sometimes it's been successful, other times not. And as you said too, Josh, the worst thing that someone can say is, no, we're not interested. And my attitude has always been, if you don't ask, the answer is always no.
Yeah, that's the reality, right? Is you make a percentage of every shot you take, so you have to take more shots to make more shots. So
true. And I guess I've never been afraid to put myself out there, which could be an asset or a detriment. I'm not quite sure, but I just do it. I keep doing it.
Yeah, and as a former art teacher, so not a salesperson by trade, but I think that's one of the takeaways. You mentioned the first episode is just having the gusto, I guess, to go in, be confident in what you're showing, and being able to ask if they're interested. I mean, that's as simple as sales can be, and show the quality of your work, and then it happens from there.
And I think I will point out to the listeners that I think that is an advantage to doing the walk-in, because at that point, if you have your merchandise with you, they can see and feel the quality of it as opposed to just a photo. So there's something to be said for that. But typically I will offer, even if we're just communicating through email or Facebook Messenger, Instagram Messenger, whatever, I will send photos, but then I will say, I am happy to, come to you and show you my products in person if, that's something that they want.
Great. No, that's good. Feeling it really brings the product to life when you're talking about the softness of the materials and the quality. So one question I did have is, what percentage of your top line revenue, your business, would you say is through that wholesale channel versus just through e-commerce on your website?
So I'm glad you brought that up, because that's really one of the things that I would love to pick your brain about. I feel like my business model is kind of backwards from where I want it to be ultimately. My e-commerce is definitely the smallest percentage of my business, and I want it to be the primary percentage of my business. Between wholesale, doing events, and I also do custom work, which I may or may not have mentioned, I don't recall, for individual clients. I would say the wholesale piece of it is probably 30%. And then between the events and custom clients, that's probably another 50%. And then the e-commerce side of my business is the smallest percentage.
Okay. And you noted narrowing focus, at least in theory, in parentheses, as far as top 3 successes. So those if those are the 4, I guess 4 custom individual clients, events, wholesale, and e-commerce, those are your 4 sales channels. I mean, that's pretty focused. When you say narrow focus, at least in theory, do you mean to focus on the e-commerce side or just focus on those 4?
Well, I guess I do mean focus on the e-commerce side. Now that you say that, that wasn't how I intended it, but that is what I want ultimately to do. But what I meant, and I apologize for my lack of clarity, was to narrow the focus of my shirts themselves, my apparel and other merchandise, because if by looking at my website, you probably noticed there's quite a variety of themes there. Mm-hmm. And so what I've been hoping to do and gradually little baby steps working toward is ironically going back to the very first type of shirts that we ever did, which are running themed shirts. So I'm looking to potentially move away, at least on the e-commerce side, from having that wide variety of themes and focusing strictly on running themed shirts.
Okay, good. No, I think having a clear understanding of the audience you want to reach is really critical. Something I picked up on, and this is pretty common, large retailers will sort their product assortment by men's, women's, children, etc., based on the individual wear. But I think for an apparel decorating company, an interesting way to present yourself is by market, because I think you kind of teed in on it there with the running apparel. You're going to have buyers from all different sizes and types of audience within running apparel, but what they have in common is they're searching for something that's unique to runners. It's kind of a lifestyle brand, something that you want to brag about, right? Just going to your name. And so I think tying in the presentation, whether it's one market or multiple markets, more to market, I think that could really prove beneficial for your e-commerce site.
Well, I'm glad to hear you agree with that, because, sometimes as business owners, especially when you work alone a lot and you don't have this team of people to bounce ideas off of, you get to wondering, is this really a good idea, or is this just like pie in the sky?
Mm-hmm. No, I think it is. I really think it is, especially if you have the ability to talk to the unique needs of that market and understand that market in depth, so you become more relevant to them. I think that's the key. And so if you have an affinity for something, whether it's running or wineries or whatever it might be, I think you can talk a different language to that customer and come across as authentic, which is really one of the most important things in today's marketplace with the power of social media and everything else.
I couldn't agree more. And you can, as you said, you can kind of talk the talk because you're that customer too, right?
Yeah, because the reality is a small business will probably never win on price. At least it's not a lasting strategy if you hope to move beyond small business. So I think winning on connection and authenticity and selling to an audience of one helps to drive value in the work, because you are going to put more time and effort into the work. I mean, hand drawings, there's some time and some labor and some effort into that. So that needs to come through on everything you do. Okay. And so you said you want to focus more on e-commerce. I think I know the answer as to why, but I want to hear why you want to focus on that part of your business over the other revenue streams.
Okay. I guess it's primarily because I feel like focusing on e-commerce, there are a few aspects to why I would like to do that. One being that I feel it would give me more time to devote to the design side of what I'm doing, which is, that's the part I love the most. And that's what got me into this to begin with, because I love to create. But, with all the other pieces of my business, they pull time away from that. So it's kind of, catch-22 there, I guess. I'm not building that side of my business as quickly as I want to, because a lot of my time is going into these other aspects of the business. In addition to that, though, Josh, I think, doing custom work and events is pretty time consuming and labor intensive. And I feel that, whether this is right or wrong, I feel that if I were able to get my e-commerce store set up the way I want it to be, that it would kind of be a self-running machine in a lot of ways, and just kind of have that more passive revenue, as opposed to, putting all the time and labor and resources into events and taking on custom clients. Yeah.
Events are heavy lifting, that's for sure. When you think about events, unless you're going to make your whole business events, events are tough to incorporate with other aspects for a small business because it can consume you. I usually like to position events as a way to enhance the brand experience for your primary market. So a good example would be if you did a pop-up live printing at the gourmet deli store that you just lined up, or the running store was having a special event and you went in and you did some live printing as a way just to strengthen those relationships and also build the retail side of the brand and what you want the brand to be, so you can drive the direct sales through e-commerce. So I see the e-commerce and the wholesale side working really well together. I think that you can have a strategy around what you want to sell and select specialty retailers in the local community, but a lot of times those same designs could be on your website, and you can still drive some of the profit back to that business if it was designed specifically for them. But it helps to create this sort of give and take relationship where they're not afraid to say these garments are provided by Brag Swag, or if you have your hang tag or a custom label on them. I think it can drive the traffic to your website and really more opportunities for consumers to buy directly as well, assuming you regulate pricing and hold to specific MSRPs, or they can always sell at a lower price than you do on your website.
Right.
That's an important element.
Right. I'm glad you mentioned that, because that is something that I neglected to mention earlier. When I present my wholesale pricing to a potential retailer, it does state that, in order to access wholesale pricing, we ask that you retail for this amount, which would not be lower than what we retail for. This amount or higher, I should say.
Yeah, when you're selling in two channels, wholesale and retail, it's important to have a what we would call an MSRP, so manufacturer's suggested retail price, and then also MAP price, which would be a minimum advertised price. So that's pretty typical for a lot of wholesale companies to deal with, where there's certain price rules. You can run some promotions and specials, and typically those are outlined, but that's important to protect the long-term vision of the brand and where you want to go.
Definitely.
Good. So let's talk through some challenges. When you look at the challenges facing your business and where you'd like to pick my brain for some advice, I guess, shoot, what do you have?
Well, I guess it would definitely go back to, what is your best advice on really building that e-commerce side, and how do I find that audience when, anyone can jump onto the internet and type in running shirts and they're probably going to get 3 billion and 2 results. How am I going to get the attention of that audience, and what strategies do you recommend for, establishing that visibility and getting that market share?
Sure. Of course, I'm not an SEO expert at all. There's companies that will charge you thousands and thousands of dollars to help you there.
Yes, there are.
Yeah, and I think that's tough, right? And so one thing I recommend is starting small. I think owning your local market is a good first step, because you're already out there in your community, and so you have to look at what advantages do I have over the Amazons of the world and the Custom Inks of the world, et cetera, et cetera. There's a million of them. Because it's going to be tough to beat those companies at just generally search traffic and getting found online.
Right.
So there's a couple ways to combat that. One is works online or in your local community, and that's just engaging with certain community segments. And so I think focusing on the running apparel is a great direction. It's very specific and intentional. You can probably find events around town that are running focused. You've already found some retailers that are running focused. I think you can spin up some local AdWords campaigns on Google and also on Facebook that really target your region. So rather than trying to market to the whole country, why not just do a certain radius from a zip code where your product's featured in a certain retail store.
Okay.
So I would definitely recommend that is marketing through Google AdWords and Facebook marketing to a certain region. I think that can be helpful. If you can go a step further and instead of just having a text-based ad and actually market with a video ad and with similar region focus on Facebook or YouTube. I think that can be beneficial as well. If there's a story you can tell about your brand or your apparel and how you appeal to runners in this instance and why they would want to buy and associate with you, I think that can be powerful.
Okay.
And then one of the things that I really wanted to point out is once somebody gets to your website, I love your tagline, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
What you got to brag about, right? Because I love that it's a question, number one. So immediately whoever engages with it, it challenges them to answer the question. So I love that aspect about it. But the question that I have is once the person visiting the site answers the question, I think something that you could do is come up with what is the next step for that person.
Okay. I like that, actually. I never thought about it that way.
Yeah, because they answer it, and then someone has the answer, and then their next question is going to be, okay, I know what I want to brag about. How do I get started? And perhaps it's not just necessarily buying a shirt at that time. Maybe it's these steps, right? Step is request a custom design for your retail store. So I think segmenting it by a wholesale messaging in the same vein on what you want a potential retail store to do as a next step, as well as a consumer message with more of a start a page, buy a shirt, whatever it may be. But I think that how do I get started is an important aspect that could come next.
Almost like a flow chart. Are you a business owner or an individual? And then, kind of take them from there based on what their answer is.
Exactly. That could be the first step of the website, because I think less is more on a homepage when you visit it. So getting people to your website is challenging enough. Once you get them there, you want to make sure that you have a very clear and specific message and call to action depending on who they are.
Okay. I think that's great, Josh. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And so usually I like to recommend 2 call to actions, and these aren't all my ideas. A lot of them are stolen from books I've read.
There's nothing new under the sun.
Right. So a tremendous book that I've recently read that I've been bragging about to everybody is Building a Story Brand.
Oh my goodness, I'm reading that too.
It's phenomenal. By Donald Miller. Yeah. And so he does a really great podcast as well, where it'll walk you through and he'll actually do analysis of a website. And he usually recommends 2 call to action. So once you get to the end of how do I get started, either have a passive call to action where it's like request more info. Basically, I'm collecting your information. I notice you have that functionality on your website when you scroll down a bit.
Woohoo.
Yeah, so I tied a little bit to a click action or some action that the shopper takes in this case. And then, of course, there's always a buy now, sign me up, let me get started. But I would definitely say less is more, and I think that will help you once you drive traffic. And again, start local or start very market specific, and that's going to allow you to land them to a page that's relevant to them.
I love that. That's excellent feedback. Thank you so much, Josh.
Good. So you mentioned you wanted some help with how to acquire bigger contracts, schools, etc. So is that somewhere you really want to take your business, do you think, after the discussion we've had so far?
I guess my struggle is this, and I think maybe a lot of folks in the group can relate to this and other listeners. I ultimately, that is not the direction that I see my business going, but that's what brings in the money right now. Mm-hmm. So to me, that's the challenge, the sticking point right there is, do I give up what's making money to focus on this building the side of e-commerce and taking the business where I ultimately want it to go? Or do I just bite the bullet and, try to manage my time better so that I can do both equally well? I'm not sure. What do you have to tell me on that?
That one's a tough one.
Yeah.
Right? You're an artist, right?
Yep.
So, and most business owners, they want to follow what gets them excited and what they're interested in. And I think that's really your drive, as you mentioned, to being able to do more time to design the artwork that you mentioned earlier that comes along with the e-commerce and the wholesale side of it. Do you think there's a way to make the other side of the business, the individual clients where you tend to be making good money, to make that a little bit more attractive for you from an art standpoint and a creative standpoint?
I found what my experience has been is it really depends on the client, how much, artistic liberty and ability to interpret their vision that they are willing to give me. I would say more clients than not have been willing to let me do the interpreting. Every once in a while, you run into one who really wants to micromanage, or they're not really clear on what they want. They think they are, but then when you try to deliver something based on what they've said they want, they say, that's not really what I wanted. So there's some frustration there. But I feel like for the most part with my custom clients, I do get to exercise, that creative part that is what I love. So, I don't know.
So give me a couple examples of, because obviously you don't want to walk away from what's paying the bills
right.
In the company. And most people would, if it's good margin business, which is a big if, right? But if it is, you would want to follow and invest more time where you're making more revenue. But so I guess I'm just trying to understand, is it really good margin business? What are some typical customers that you have now that are driving that 50% of revenue?
So you're asking about what types of customers I'd take on for custom work?
Yeah, like if you look at your top 10 customers for custom work right now, what types of businesses are they? Schools, what?
It's a variety. I have dealt with a couple of schools in the past. I deal with a lot of nonprofits as well. So the challenge, I feel like there's a challenge and an opportunity that sometimes comes with nonprofits or charity type of organizations. We really like to support, ones that are near and dear to our hearts. So doing work for them that is ultimately going to help them build revenue is very gratifying for us. But at the same time, you're recognizing that they may not have, and they don't have the resources to, I guess what I'm saying is you typically end up cutting your margins some to, help them get what they need on the budget that they have. So while I definitely enjoy the work that I do for them, the margins aren't always as good. And the same with schools. Sometimes having worked in schools for so many years, I know the budget is not always there. I do work for some business owners, but typically it's smaller businesses, so they don't have a large staff that they're going to be buying shirts for. It's just kind of a variety of folks, and a lot of it's really just local word of mouth is how people find me.
Yeah. So one thing I would question, and you'll have to do some analysis on this, is it sounds like high touch, low margin business to me. So although it may be a large percentage of your overall revenue, perhaps it is not the most profitable business that you could be doing, which is why you're drawn to the e-commerce side, which is very profitable if you can drive more sales there.
Exactly. And
so I think
go ahead. I'm sorry, Josh.
I was just going to say, I think doing an analysis on each of your revenue streams, your channels, figuring out how much time you spend over the course of a day, a week, a month, depending on how long you want to collect the data on it, on what a typical day looks like, and then being able to associate some costs, at least an estimate of cost to each of those channels. So if e-commerce takes up 10% of your time, but is 20% of the revenue, if the custom business takes up 80% of the time and is only 50% of the revenue, then you can start attributing what you're paying yourself, what you're paying for. Are you out of your home or are you in a storefront?
I'm out of my home.
Okay, so you can start to attribute, that percentage of the space and electricity and everything that you're allocating to that side of the business to get a true understanding of what costs. I mean, just a quick test would be the time, because I feel like that's the biggest deal for a home business, especially a single person business, is the time and what you can be spending it on. Right.
And those are all excellent points and definitely something that I need to consider. I think you're right that it is a high touch, lower margin in some instances for sure. I do want to interject for just a second if I can. I feel like I need to give credit where credit is due. My husband, he is a huge asset and help in Brag Swag, even though I like to refer to him as my not so silent partner. It is my business, but he helps so much that it's kind of like his business too. So I know a lot of us folks out there, especially home-based folks or folks who may be doing this as a side hustle, having that spouse or partner, family, friends, whoever, the folks who jump in and help you get things done and are there to support you. I mean, I couldn't do it without him. So just need to give him a shout out. He's got a lot to brag about, so I'm giving him his dues.
I'm sure he appreciates that, and I think that's a huge deal when you're going into business, is just having a support system to be able to bounce things off of, to be able to be an extra set of hands when you're working on a job under a tight deadline. So that's awesome to hear that you have that support system in your husband. Very cool.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel very, very fortunate. And of course, having, resources like the Facebook group and, you guys just always being there to answer questions and taking the time to, how folks in the group help one another and you doing this podcast, all the things that you guys do to give us that virtual and, in reality support system. I appreciate that so much too.
Yeah, our theory is if we help you be as successful as possible, our business grows along with it. So that's been the Stahls philosophy, probably since 1932 when the company started.
Well, I think it's a good one. It seems to be working. It's a win-win for all of us. So I'm so glad.
Yeah, I know as a team here, we're all bought in. It makes it more fun to come to work to be able to do these things. So
absolutely.
I'm glad to hear they're helping.
Yes, thank you.
Good. So this is the point of the show where I feel like we've solved a lot of challenges. We've certainly talked through a lot of ideas.
Yeah.
Where I want to give you the opportunity to share advice or tips with other apparel decorators that may be in a similar situation to you. So what would you, being 7 years, I think you said, into the business,
lucky
at least
number
a couple
7
years, full time, what's some of the top pieces of advice that you'd share with other listeners that are just getting started?
Oh my gosh, Josh, I don't think we have all day because, if you let me go, I could probably come up with, 100 things that I would say to do or not to do and, take it for what it's worth. But just a couple of things off the top of my head. It's one thing that I have found being a business owner, especially a solo business owner, is there's a lot of ups and downs, not only in terms of how your business is performing, but just emotionally as well. Some days it's like, this is fantastic. I don't know why I didn't do this sooner. And other days it's like, oh my goodness, what am I thinking? Have I lost my mind? So just my advice would be, especially if you're just starting out, to kind of ride that out and hang in there and know that it is not a straight line. The other thing that I would say is to really develop and nurture those relationships that you have, whether it be with your retail partners, like I talked about earlier, or other business owners in the virtual world or in the real world who can be there to support you and you can support them. Just with the folks who love your product and help you survive financially by buying from you. I think that there's a lot to be said for maintaining excellent customer service and having that personal connection with people because, we shop so much online and that's an awesome thing. I'm not taking anything away from that, certainly with myself being an e-retailer. But I think, if you can, putting a handwritten note in with a customer's order goes a long way. So I think sometimes it's just making those little things a priority to let people know that you appreciate them.
Great. That's great advice. The name of the book's escaping me, but I believe it's called The Simple Truths of Service. Have you ever read that one?
I've not. I don't think I've even heard of that one.
Gosh, you could read it in a half hour to 45 minutes. That's how easy this book is to read. So The Simple Truths of Service.
Okay, I'm writing it down.
it talks about putting your personal signature on your work and your feedback and your advice about a handwritten note and the importance of the personal connection. And a lot of the buying decision is based on connection, based on the sales experience. So as a small business owner, you can really do things at a different level than a giant e-commerce retailer can. So I think that's a great piece of advice for our listeners.
I'm going to check that book out. Thanks for mentioning it.
Oh, no problem. Before we close up the show, do you have any additional questions that you want to ask me?
Well, I'm sure that as soon as we end this, I'll probably think of a few more, but I know where I can post them in the group.
Yeah, just tag me on Facebook and Heat Press for Profit, and we'll be there. So for our listeners, you should have learned a lot in this episode. So we learned some tips about selling to wholesalers. We've picked up on how to categorize your business so you can focus on areas that you want to grow in. You've learned a lot of tips about personalized service and growth strategies there. And more than anything, just kind of finding your way through the ups and downs, the importance of a support system, and staying committed and riding through the tough times with Milissa here. So we want to thank Milissa for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
We really appreciate it, and we want to wish you so much success as you continue to look to grow your apparel business. We also hope you as our listener found something on today's show that inspired you. I know I did. So if you'd like to ask follow-up questions, just look for our show conversation thread over at our Heat Press for Profit Facebook group, where you can network and share ideas with thousands of business owners aiming to make a profit with heat printing just like you. Thanks for listening to today's episode.